Each sound comes first. 3 soft knocks, spaced like a heartbeat, then silence. In the darkness of Utah's limestone corridors, rescue workers freeze, their headlamps casting trembling halos on rock slick with condensation. Someone whispers, "Did you hear that?" Another hushes him. They count the seconds. 3 more knocks, weaker this time, from somewhere beyond the narrow crawl space ahead. Every man in that tunnel knows the math of sound underground. Solid stone eats distance, bends direction. It could be a foot away or 50, but they all know what they're hearing isn't echo. It's someone alive. 7 days earlier, on a cold morning in late November 2009, a 32-year-old medical student named Nate Ellison left his apartment in Provo with a headlamp, a rope bag, and the easy confidence of a man who knew his hobby too well to fear it. Caving wasn't a weekend thrill for him. It was ritual. He'd spent years exploring Utah's limestone systems, mapping tight squeezes that most people couldn't even look at without panic. The one he talked about most was Nutty Putty Cave, west of Utah Lake, a maze of crawls and vertical chimneys closed for years after safety concerns. It had reopened with new restrictions that month. Nate had permission to survey a newly cleared branch. He told his fiancée, "I'll be home before midnight. The air there's dry, perfect for a quick run." At 11:45 a.m., he signed in at the gate register. By noon, he was crawling on his stomach through a passage called Scout Eater, the rock pressing against his chest with each breath. He carried 2 headlamps, a small digital camera, and a radio that only worked near the surface. His friend, Josh Briggs, waited outside to assist. Nate's plan was simple. Follow the known corridor, check an uncharted slot rumored to connect to a lower chamber, and backtrack before evening. The last radio check came at 1:14 p.m. "Air's fine," Nate said, his voice echoing. "Just taking some photos." The signal broke. Josh called again 15 minutes later. Nothing. He waited another hour, assuming Nate was focused on mapping. But when darkness began to creep across the valley, he felt a pulse of unease. By 8 p.m., with frost forming on his windshield, he called the Utah County Sheriff's Office. Within 90 minutes, a rescue team was en route. The first responders arrived under a moonless sky. They rigged generators for light, uncoiled hundreds of feet of rope, and descended through the mouth of the cave, a jagged hole in the hillside no wider than a man's shoulders. Inside, air smelled of dust and iron. You could hear the heartbeat in your ears. One rescuer later said, "That's how tight it was." They shouted Nate's name into the tunnels. No response, only the dripping of groundwater somewhere in the dark. By dawn, 12 rescuers were on site. They followed his footprints until they stopped near a vertical crack known as the birth canal. There, one boot mark vanished into a crevice no bigger than a crawl tunnel. When they lowered a camera, it caught a glimpse of blue fabric, then darkness. "We've got something," someone said. They widened the passage by hand, scooping clay, stone, and dust. At 10:32 a.m., a helmeted rescuer squeezed far enough in to shine his light forward and saw a boot sole motionless in front of him. Nate was wedged upside down, his torso contorted into a cavity too small to turn around in. His headlamp still glowed faintly. "He's breathing," the rescuer shouted. The relief that followed was short-lived. They tried to reach him with a rope sling, but the angle was impossible. Every pull threatened to tighten the rock around his chest. He could talk, weakly at first. "I'm stuck. Tell her I'm okay." They gave him water through a tube, measured oxygen levels, pumped warm air in through a hose. Above ground, crews built a pulley anchor system to winch him backward a few inches at a time. "We'll have you out soon," they promised. Hours passed. The cave ceiling groaned with shifting clay. Outside, news vans began to arrive. Reporters camped near the perimeter fence, their lights bouncing off the limestone. Families gathered in blankets, waiting for any update. A paramedic explained that time underground works differently. Muscles swell, blood pools, breath shortens. The rescue leader, Captain Eric Hansen, spoke to cameras briefly. "We have contact," he said. "We're doing everything possible." Behind him, the generators hummed like distant thunder. By the second night, they had rigged a mechanical advantage system to pull him free slowly. Every inch gained felt like victory. But near dawn, a bolt anchor failed. The pulley snapped loose, striking the tunnel wall. Dust filled the air. "Hold! Stop!" someone yelled. In the confusion, Nate slipped further down, wedged deeper. His voice faded to murmurs. Rescuers checked his vitals by touch, feeling the faint rhythm of his chest through rock. "Stay with us, Nate." He managed one reply, "Still here," then silence. They worked without rest. Oxygen sensors dropped. The confined heat and carbon dioxide built up. Rescuers rotated shifts, emerging pale and shaking. A doctor on site warned of hypoxia. "We're running out of time." At 72 hours, they heard faint tapping, 2 short, 1 long, from below. Morse code maybe, or reflex. It came 3 times that night, each fainter than the last. By day 5, exhaustion set in. The cave had become a labyrinth of ropes, air hoses, and hope stretched thin. Engineers proposed drilling from above, but the angle risked collapse. The temperature inside hovered near 40 degrees. Condensation turned dust into slick mud. They fed warm fluids through the tube whenever he responded. Sometimes he whispered, "Thank you." Sometimes, nothing. The rescue base outside grew quiet. Reporters lowered their voices. The sheriff stopped giving hourly updates. On the 7th night, just past midnight, 2 rescuers deep inside the passage heard it again. 3 deliberate knocks, slow and spaced. One counted aloud, hand pressed to the wall. "That's not echo." They called up the shaft. "We've got contact. He's alive." Cheers erupted topside. Crews raced to recheck air pumps and anchors. They shouted down encouragement. "Hang on, Nate." For several minutes, more tapping answered back. Faint, rhythmic, human. Then it stopped. ... No one moved for a long time. One rescuer leaned his head against the rock and whispered a prayer. They listened again. Nothing. At 2:14 a.m., the CO2 sensors spiked. Command ordered an evacuation. "We'll go back in once air stabilizes," the captain said. But when they returned an hour later, the tunnel was silent. Air colder, the walls beginning to shift. At dawn, engineers declared the chamber unstable. One section of ceiling had collapsed, locking the passage entirely. "If we dig further, we'll lose men," Hansen said quietly. No one argued. They left sensors inside, hoping for movement or sound. The monitors stayed flat. By the 8th day, rescue became recovery. Family members gathered under gray sky, holding each other as officials explained the danger. "He's beyond reach," they said. The cave had decided its terms. There were tears, anger, disbelief. Josh, the friend who'd waited outside that first night, said softly he just wanted to map the world a little better. Within a week, the state sealed the entrance with concrete, leaving a plaque, "In memory of the one who sought the heart of the mountain." No cameras filmed the final pour, only wind and the hum of machinery. Yet those who were there still remember the sound, the slow, patient tapping echoing through rock. Some swear it was Morse for HELP. Others think it was the mountain settling. But every November, when the air turns dry and the wind moves through the desert hollows, locals claim you can still hear it. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more, from somewhere deep beneath the hill. When the concrete sealed the mouth of Nutty Putty, the sound stopped forever. The men who had been inside that week stood at the rim as the last slab hardened, their helmets dangling from tired hands. No one spoke. They watched the gray surface turn matte in the morning air, felt the vibration under their boots as the cement settled, and realized that the cave had become something new. A tomb without a nameplate. Cameras waited beyond the fence, but the rescuers kept their backs to them. One of them said quietly, "He's part of the rock now." Another nodded. "He always was." In the weeks that followed, the rescue notes turned into paperwork. Reports written in careful, neutral sentences. Subject located. Communication established. Recovery unfeasible due to instability. Each line erased a little more of the sound they had heard. The sheriff signed the final page with a heavy pen stroke and closed the file. But the cave did not close in their minds for the rest of that winter. Some of the crew said they dreamed in stone. In sleep, they crawled again through that narrow chute, heard the taps repeating from behind a wall they could never reach. News coverage lasted 3 days. Then the story disappeared from front pages, buried under politics and weather. Only the local paper kept it alive, tiny columns with updates on memorial plans. Volunteers built a trail marker at the top of the ridge, a small brass plaque fixed to a wooden post. It read simply, "For Nate, the mountain listens." Beneath it, people left flashlights, ropes, letters sealed in plastic. By spring, the letters formed a wind-rippled banner across the hillside. Inside the university's geology department, students organized a lecture on cave safety. One of Nate's professors, a white-bearded man who had taught him mapping techniques, began the session with a slide of the Nutty Putty entrance. "This is what curiosity looks like," he said, voice trembling. "It doesn't always lead where you think it will." He paused before adding, "We owe it to him to keep exploring, just a little wiser." Through 2010, safety reforms spread quietly. The state reviewed every known recreational cave, installing new gates, new air monitors, new training protocols. A line of text added to each permit: exploration at entrance own risk. Natural closure may occur without warning. The language was clinical, but those who'd been at Nutty Putty understood what it meant. In Provo, Nate's fiancée, Rachel, moved apartments, but kept his climbing gear in a single box by the door. She couldn't throw it away, couldn't open it either. Every anniversary, she drove to the ridge, left a new battery for the lantern hanging from the memorial post, and watched the light fade into dusk. Once she told a local reporter, "It's not the darkness that haunts me, it's the silence that followed." For years, no one spoke about reopening the site. The mountain kept its secret. Then, in 2022, a team of geotechnical researchers proposed a ground-penetrating radar study to map subterranean voids for seismic safety. They had to apply for a permit to scan the area near the old cave. The request triggered headlines again. Utah cave to be mapped after 13 years. People thought it meant excavation. It didn't. The study was done from the surface, harmless and remote. But when the drone hovered over the sealed entrance, its radar pulse returned a ghostly outline: chambers, tunnels, air pockets, and a single dense shape wedged between two voids. The technician turned to his colleague. "That's where they said he was." They saved the data, printed the cross-section, and archived it under Memorial Scan. The image circulated quietly online. To some, it looked like proof. To others, like haunting. Rachel saw it once and never again. "I don't need coordinates to know where he is," she told a friend. "I can still hear him when I close my eyes." She meant the tapping, but also something else, the part of him that refused to vanish completely. By 2024, a short documentary aired on public television, "The Man the Mountain Kept." It wasn't sensational, just voices, rescuers, engineers, family. Over faded photographs, you could hear the ambient sounds of the cave, dripping water, wind through cracks, and near the end, a faint reproduction of that rhythm. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more. The segment went viral in climbing forums, shared thousands of times. Commenters called it everything from miraculous to cruel. One wrote, Maybe the sound was the earth learning to breathe him in. In April 2025, a new cave system was discovered 80 miles south. Reporters rushed to call it Nutty Putty's twin. It drew explorers immediately, but none of the original rescuers joined. I've seen enough stone for one life, Hansen said when asked. You can't compete with a mountain's memory. That summer, Rachel visited the memorial trail again. The post leaned slightly from wind. She straightened it, replaced the weathered plaque with a polished one engraved deeper so time couldn't erase it. As she tightened the bolts, thunder rolled somewhere far away. She smiled faintly. "You still testing the air down there?" she said to the ground. The wind answered by shifting through the grass, a low whisper that could have been anything. She sat until evening. When night came, she switched on the lantern one last time. Its beam reached the rock face, painting the limestone gold. Then she left it burning and walked back down the trail. From a distance, hikers later said they saw a single light glowing against the hillside long after the rain began, steady as a star. In the years after, Nutty Putty became a ghost name among cavers, a story you told before entering any tunnel. Some brought small brass bells to hang at entrances, a quiet promise that if anything went wrong, the world above would at least hear the ring. The sound caught in the wind and drifted across valleys. Locals said those bells never rusted, no matter the weather. Among the old crew, no one forgot the final knock. Hansen retired, moved north, and built birdhouses with his hands that once dragged ropes through clay. Sometimes he'd pause mid-hammer, tapping twice, then once more. He never explained why. Maybe habit, maybe memory. A decade after the sealing, researchers found that seismic monitors near the ridge picked up faint vibrations on stormy nights, tiny rhythmic pulses matching that same pattern. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. The data logs marked them as environmental interference. One technician smiled when he read that. "Sure," he said softly. "Environmental." Now, when visitors reach the ridge at dusk, they sometimes place an ear to the rock for a moment. They don't expect to hear anything. Most just listen to the wind funneling through crevices, the scrape of gravel shifting under their boots. But occasionally, if the valley is still enough and the air carries just right, they swear they catch a sound beneath it all. Faint, deliberate, patient. 3 taps, pause, 3 more. The guides tell them it's only the cave settling. That stone has its own heartbeat. Still, when they walk away, they look back once at the smooth gray surface where an entrance used to be. And they walk a little softer, as if not to wake the mountain. Pause. The concrete looks different after 15 years. The pale gray has darkened to the color of rain clouds, streaked with iron stains that trace the shape of water's slow escape. There are small hollows where air bubbles once were, tiny fossils of the moment the cave was sealed. People still come, not many, mostly locals, hikers, a few students. They stand at the fence for a minute or two, say nothing, and leave something small behind. A pebble, a note, a flashlight battery. None of it stays long. The wind reclaims everything. In late 2025, a state ranger named Eli Ward was assigned to inspect the memorial trail after heavy rain. He hadn't been born when the accident happened, but he'd read the case file during training. He expected erosion, maybe down signs, nothing more. By mid-morning, he reached the ridge, mud caked on his boots. The air smelled like wet metal. The plaque still gleamed, the lantern hook still upright. But as he walked along the fence line, he felt something odd under his heel. A soft vibration, 3 pulses. He stepped back, crouched, placed his palm to the ground. Nothing. Just his heartbeat echoing in his wrist. He smiled at himself, shook his head, and went back to work. Still, when he filled out his report that night, he wrote one extra sentence. Ground felt alive underfoot. No movement visible. The state filed it as normal wear. but the detail spread quietly through ranger chatter. "Ward felt it too," one said. "Maybe the ground remembers more than we think." It became a campfire line again, the same way stories cycle back when enough time passes. Rachel never remarried. By 2026, she lived near Salt Lake City, working as a nurse. On quiet nights, she drove south, parked by the ridge, and watched the sunset through the windshield. She didn't climb to the memorial anymore. She said it felt right to stay below, as if visiting from the valley kept the connection more honest. Once a reporter recognized her at a gas station and asked if she still heard the tapping. She smiled politely. "It's not sound anymore," she said. "It's rhythm. You carry it with you after a while." In early spring, a documentary team returned to record a follow-up episode on modern cave rescue. They brought sonar equipment to demonstrate how sound travels through rock. During one test, a crew member struck the ground 3 times with a rubber mallet. Audio spike on the monitor looked perfect. 3 tall peaks, equal spacing. Then, a second set appeared after a brief delay. Fainter, lower, returning from somewhere beneath. "Echo," the technician said, but his voice wavered. They replayed the recording later in the studio. The first 3 knocks were clear. The second set had a strange cadence, slightly slower, as if answering. They left that part out of the final cut. By summer, heat baked the valley. A group of local volunteers gathered to restore it. Among them was a high school student named Levi, the son of one of the original rescuers. His father had told him the story when he was little, how sound could travel farther through limestone than through air, how patience sometimes sounded like knocking. While polishing the plaque, Levi asked, "Do you think he was scared down there?" Hansen, now old and stooped but still sharp-eyed, thought before answering. "I think he was listening," he said. "He always listened." That night, after the work was done, they lit a single lantern and sat in silence. The air cooled quickly. Stars came out in waves. Somewhere far below, water dripped in a rhythm that could have been anything. Hansen tapped his boot on the ground 3 times. No one responded, but no one laughed either. The act itself felt like a prayer. The next morning, the new plaque shone like gold against the rock. It read, "For the explorer who taught us to listen." The cave is closed, but the echo remains. People took photos, posted them online. Views climbed fast. Comments poured in from all over the world. Scientists, climbers, students, people who had never set foot in Utah. "It's strange," one wrote. "I watched this before bed, and when the wind hit my window, I thought I heard 3 knocks." The algorithm did what algorithms do. It carried the story further than the rescue ever had. Millions watched, millions shared. The mountain became digital. The silence uploaded. Back in Utah, the ridge stayed quiet. No signs, no crowds. Just a slope of wild grass waving over concrete. Birds nested in the cracks near the fence. On certain evenings, the last light of the sun hit the plaque perfectly, turning the letters bright enough to read from the road below. Drivers slowed without knowing why. Some said the glow looked like a lantern still burning underground. One winter evening, Eli Ward hiked back up alone. The snow was deep, the air still. He wanted to see if frost had cracked the cement. He brushed snow from the surface and crouched, listening. Nothing, only wind. Then a soft sound, distant but real. 3 hollow thuds, far below. He waited. 3 more. He laughed quietly, not frightened. "Evening, Nate," he said. The wind shifted, carrying his breath back toward the valley. When spring returned, wildflowers pushed through the gravel again, bluebells and primrose, their roots tangled in cracks of the old road. Tourists noticed the color and came more often. Each left a token, a pebble, a note, a piece of rope. The fence collected stories the way caves collect echoes. Rachel visited one final time that summer. She was older now, hair silver at the temples. She walked slowly, carrying a small metal box. At the plaque she knelt, opened the box, and placed inside a folded map, one Nate had drawn by hand years before, its pencil lines still sharp. She closed the lid and left it on the ground. "This was supposed to show the way out," she whispered. "Maybe now it shows the way home." She touched the concrete once, like you might touch someone's shoulder, then turned away. Rain came again that evening, light and steady. Drops hissed on the surface, merging into rhythm. To anyone else, it sounded like weather. To those who knew the story, it sounded like knocking. The sound grew softer, then stopped altogether as the clouds thickened and dusk settled over the ridge. Far below, in darkness no light could reach, air shifted through the old tunnels, moving dust that hadn't stirred in years. The mountain exhaled slowly, and the faintest vibration traveled upward through stone. A rhythm as old as patience itself. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. No one heard it this time, but it didn't matter. The mountain remembered. It always would.